I was standing in my living room paintbrush in hand, admiring the fresh coat of sage green I had just applied to the walls. 6 months ago, this three-bedroom house in the suburbs of Denver had become mine after 8 long years of saving every penny I could. As a software engineer, I had worked countless overtime hours, skipped vacations, and lived in cramped studio apartments just to make this dream a reality. The house was not just 4 walls and a roof to me. It was proof that hard work pays off, a sanctuary I had built through discipline and sacrifice. The afternoon sun streamed through the windows, casting warm shadows across the hardwood floors. I had spent weeks refinishing myself. Before we dive into this family drama that changed everything, let me know where you are watching from. Hit that like button if you have ever felt taken for granted by family. And do not forget to subscribe, because this story has some twists you will not see coming. Now let me tell you what happened when I walked into that living room. My phone buzzed on the kitchen counter, interrupting my moment of peaceful satisfaction. Dad's name flashed on the screen, and something in his tone immediately set off alarm bells when I answered. "Keith, you need to come over to the house right now," Harold said, his voice carrying an unusual weight of authority. "We need to discuss something important about the family." I set down my paintbrush and grabbed my keys, driving the familiar 15-minute route to my childhood home. The modest ranch-style house where I grew up looked the same as always, but something felt different as I pulled into the driveway. Through the front window, I could see figures moving around in the living room. Walking through the front door, I found myself facing what looked like a family tribunal. Dad sat in his worn leather recliner, his weathered hands folded in his lap. At 60, Harold still carried himself with the quiet strength of a man who had spent 30 years fixing pipes and earning every dollar through honest labor. Mom, Patricia, perched on the edge of the sofa, her reading glasses hanging from a chain around her neck. At 58, she had the sharp, efficient demeanor of someone who had managed office schedules for decades. My older brother Danny was there too, sitting uncomfortably on the opposite end of the sofa. At 35, Danny looked exhausted in the way that only parents of young children can. His wife Sarah sat beside him, bouncing 18-month-old Lily on her knee while trying to keep 8-year-old Jake and 5-year-old Emma from destroying the coffee table with their coloring books. "Take a seat, Keith," Dad said, gesturing toward the remaining chair. "We have been doing some thinking about your situation and Danny's situation, and we think there might be a way for everyone to benefit." I settled into the chair, my unease growing by the second. "What kind of situation are we talking about?" Mom leaned forward, her expression softening in that way she used when she was about to ask for a favor. "Well, honey, you know how much we love all of you kids equally, and we know how hard you have worked to get that beautiful house of yours." Danny shifted uncomfortably, unable to meet my eyes. I had known about their housing struggles for months. His family of 5 was crammed into a 2-bedroom apartment across town, with the kids sharing one small room and the baby's crib squeezed into the master bedroom. Danny worked as a warehouse supervisor, and while Sarah picked up part-time work, when she could, childcare costs ate up most of her earnings. "The thing is," Dad continued, "your brother here has 3 little ones who need space to grow and play. That apartment they are in now, well, it is just not suitable for a family that size." I could see where this was heading, but I hoped I was wrong. "Dad, what exactly are you asking me to do?" "Well," Mom said, glancing at Danny before looking back at me, "we were thinking that maybe you could share your house with Danny's family. You have got all that extra space, and you are just one person." The words hit me like a physical blow. Share my house. The house I had worked 8 years to afford. The house that represented everything I had accomplished on my own. "I do not understand," I said slowly. "Share how exactly?" Danny finally spoke up, his voice barely above a whisper. "Keith, I am not trying to take anything away from you, but the kids are sleeping on a pull-out couch in the living room. Emma keeps asking why she cannot have her own room like her friends at school." As if on cue, little Jake looked up from his coloring book and said, Uncle Keith, do you have a big backyard where I could play soccer? My heart broke a little for the kids, but the rational part of my mind was screaming warnings. Danny, I sympathize with your situation. I really do. But this house is my home. I saved for 8 years to buy it. The temperature in the room seemed to drop 10 degrees. Dad's jaw tightened, and Mom's expression shifted from sweet to disappointed. Keith, Dad, said, his voice taking on an edge I rarely heard. Family comes first. Always has in this house. You are 32 years old and single. What do you need 3 bedrooms for? I need them because they are mine, I replied, trying to keep my voice steady. I worked for this house, Dad. Every square foot of it. Mom shook her head sadly. I raised you boys to look out for each other. Danny has children to think about. Surely you can see that they need that space more than you do. I looked around the room at faces that had once felt like home to me, and now they all seemed like strangers. Even Sarah was nodding along, though she at least had the decency to look embarrassed about the whole conversation. I am sorry, I said, standing up from my chair. I understand that Danny's situation is difficult, but giving up my house is not the solution. There has to be another way. The silence that followed my words was deafening. Dad did not say goodbye when I left, and Mom just shook her head like I had disappointed her beyond measure. Driving home that evening, I could not shake the feeling that I had just crossed a line I did not even know existed. The phone calls started the next morning and did not stop for 3 days straight. Dad called during my lunch break at work, his voice cold and disapproving. Keith, I have been thinking about our conversation yesterday, and I want you to reconsider your position. You are being selfish, and that is not how I raised you. Dad, I am not being selfish. I am protecting something I worked years to achieve. Family comes first, son. I thought you understood that. Before I could respond, he hung up. An hour later, Mom called. Keith, honey, I drove by Danny's apartment today and saw those poor children trying to play in that tiny courtyard. There is broken glass on the ground and nowhere safe for them to ride their bikes. How can you live with yourself knowing you have a big backyard going to waste? Each call chipped away at my resolve a little more. By Thursday, I was starting to question whether I was indeed being unreasonably selfish. Maybe they were right. Maybe I did not need all that space. That weekend, Danny showed up at my door with all 3 kids in tow. Hey, Keith, I hope you do not mind us stopping by. The kids were asking about Uncle Keith's house. Jake and Emma ran around my backyard like puppies, let off their leashes, and baby Lily clapped her hands with delight when Jake pushed her on the old swing I had hung from the oak tree. Watching them play, I felt a stab of guilt so sharp it took my breath away. Keith, Danny said quietly, while we watched the kids from the back porch, I am not asking you to give up your house. Maybe we could work something out where my family stays here temporarily while I save up for a down payment on our own place. Before I could answer, Jake came running up to us, grass stains on his knees and pure joy on his face. Daddy, is this where we are going to live? Emma said. Uncle Keith might let us move into the big house. My blood ran cold. Danny had already told his children that moving into my house was a possibility. He had given them hope for something that I had never agreed to. Jake, we are just visiting today, I said carefully, but the damage was already done. The little boy's face fell, and he ran back to his sisters with obvious disappointment. Danny had the grace to look ashamed. Keith, I may have mentioned to Sarah that you might be willing to help us out, and she might have said something to the kids about the possibility of more space. That Sunday, I received a command rather than an invitation to attend another family meeting. This time, my grandparents were there too. Grandpa Joe, 82 years old, and still sharp as a tack, sat in Dad's usual chair, while Grandma Rose fussed over the coffee and cookies. Keith's sweetheart, Grandma Rose, said in her gentle voice, "Your grandfather and I have been talking, and we think you should seriously consider helping your brother out. You are still young. You will have plenty of time to buy another house later." Grandpa Joe nodded gravely. "When I was your age, Keith family stuck together through thick and thin. We did not have much, but what we had we shared. I found myself surrounded by 4 generations of family members, all united in the belief that I should give up my house for Danny's children. The pressure was suffocating. "You are 32. And single dad repeated, as if my marital status somehow diminished my right to own property. "What do you need all that space for? Are you planning to fill those bedrooms with furniture and let them sit empty while your nephew and nieces sleep on couches?" "Harold is right," Mom added. "Danny has responsibilities you do not have yet. When you have children of your own, someday we will all be here to help you too." I looked around the room at faces I had loved my entire life, faces that now seemed to belong to strangers who could not understand why I would want to keep something I had earned through my own hard work. "I am sorry," I said, my voice stronger than I felt inside. "I understand that Danny's situation is difficult, and I wish there was something I could do to help, but giving up my house is not the answer. I will not do it." The disappointment in the room was palpable. Grandma Rose actually looked hurt, and Grandpa Joe shook his head like I had let down the entire family legacy. As I drove home that evening, I wondered if standing up for myself was worth losing the approval of everyone I loved. For a week, my phone stayed eerily quiet. No calls from Dad with his lectures about family loyalty. No guilt trips from Mom about the children sleeping on couches. The silence was almost worse than the pressure had been, because I knew they were planning something. The call came on a Tuesday morning while I was reviewing code at work. Dad's voice was different this time, colder and more formal than I had ever heard it. "Keith, your mother and I have made a decision about your situation with Danny." "My situation with Danny," I repeated. "Dad, there is no situation. I said no, and that should be the end of it. Since your brother has kids, he should get your house," Dad said, as if he were announcing the weather. "This is my final decision as the head of this family." I nearly dropped my phone. "Dad, you cannot decide what happens to my house. I own it. My name is on the deed, and I pay the mortgage." There was a pause, and then I heard Mom's voice in the background before she took the phone from Dad. "Keith," she said, and there was something in her tone that made my skin crawl, something almost gleeful. "We tried to handle this the nice way, but you have forced our hand." "What are you talking about, Mom?" Her voice dropped to barely above a whisper, but I could hear the smirk in it. "Then we will just take it another way." The line went dead, leaving me staring at my phone in confusion and growing dread. Take it another way. What could they possibly mean by that? I tried calling back, but no one answered. I left work early and drove straight to their house. But Dad's truck was not in the driveway, and Mom's car was gone too. The house looked empty, almost deliberately so. That night, I barely slept. Mom's words kept echoing in my head. Take it another way. What did that even mean? How could they take my house? They had no legal claim to it, no financial stake in it, no documentation connecting them to the purchase. The next morning, everything became horrifyingly clear. I was pouring my first cup of coffee when I saw the mail truck pull up to my mailbox. Along with the usual bills and junk, mail was a thick envelope from Patterson Williams and Associates Attorneys at Law. My hands shook as I tore it open. The legal documents inside made my blood turn to ice. My parents, Harold and Patricia, were suing me for partial ownership of my house, claiming that they had provided financial assistance during the purchase that I had never acknowledged or repaid. According to their complaint, they had given me 40% of the down payment as a family loan, and I had fraudulently excluded them from the deed. It was all lies. Complete fabricated lies. I grabbed my phone and called Dad immediately. This time, he answered on the first ring. "Dad, what the hell is this lawsuit about? You know you never gave me money for this house, Keith. You forced our hand," he said calmly. "We tried to be reasonable with you, but you chose to be stubborn and selfish. Now we are handling this through proper legal channels." Proper legal channels. "Dad, You are lying. You never gave me a dime toward this house, and you know it. That is for the courts to decide, son. Maybe next time you will think twice before you refuse to help your family." I was so shocked I could barely form words. "You are seriously going to commit perjury to steal my house?" "We are not stealing anything, Keith. We are claiming what is rightfully ours. Danny needs that house, and if you will not do the right thing voluntarily, then we will make sure justice is served." After he hung up, I sat at my kitchen table, staring at the legal papers, trying to process what was happening. My own parents, the people who had raised me to be honest and hard-working, were fabricating evidence to take away the home I had spent 8 years earning. I called in sick to work and drove around Denver aimlessly for hours, my mind reeling. How could they do this? How could the people who taught me about integrity and honesty be so willing to lie and cheat when it served their purposes? That evening, I noticed Danny's car parked on the street 2 blocks from my house. When I drove by, I saw him sitting behind the wheel, just watching my house like he was already planning where to put his furniture. The betrayal was complete. My parents had declared war on me, and my brother was already scouting his future home. I realized that night that if they wanted to fight dirty, I would have to be smarter than all of them combined. The first thing I did was call in every favor I had to get a recommendation for the best family law attorney in Denver. Marcus Thompson had a reputation for being brilliant, ruthless, and expensive. His retainer fee was more than I had in my savings account, but I did not care. I was fighting for my life. Marcus was a tall, imposing man in his 50s with silver hair and the kind of confidence that comes from winning cases that other lawyers would not touch. His office overlooked downtown Denver, and the walls were covered with law degrees and awards that spoke to his expertise. "Keith," he said, after reviewing the lawsuit papers, "I want you to understand something very clearly. What your parents are attempting to do here is not just legally questionable, it is morally reprehensible. They are committing fraud, and they are doing it to their own son." He leaned back in his leather chair and studied me carefully. "The good news is that this is one of the most baseless lawsuits I have ever seen. They have no documentation, no bank records, no witnesses, and no evidence of any kind to support their claims. The bad news is that defending against it is going to cost you time, money, and probably your relationship with your family." "They already destroyed the relationship when they decided to lie and steal," I replied. "I just want to keep my house." Marcus smiled for the first time since I had met him. "Then let us give them a fight they will never forget." Over the next 2 weeks, I gathered every piece of financial documentation from the past 8 years, bank statements showing my systematic savings, pay stubs proving my income, tax returns demonstrating that I had never claimed any gifts or loans from family members, the down payment check that came entirely from my own account, the mortgage application that listed no co-signers or contributors. Marcus was thorough in a way that impressed even me. He contacted my former landlords to establish my rental history and financial independence. He obtained statements from my bank confirming that no large deposits from Harold or Patricia had ever been made to my accounts. He even tracked down the real estate agent who had handled my home purchase to testify that my parents had never been involved in any aspect of the transaction. Keith, Marcus said during one of our strategy meetings, "Your parents have made a critical error. They have committed their lies to paper in legal documents. That means when we prove they are lying, which we absolutely will, they will not only lose this case, they will face potential criminal charges for perjury and fraud." The discovery process was brutal. Marcus demanded that Harold and Patricia provide documentation for their claimed loan, bank statements showing the withdrawal of 40% of my down payment, any receipts, emails, text messages, or written agreements related to this supposed family loan. They could not produce a single piece of evidence because none existed. Meanwhile, I learned through Danny that my parents had already spent nearly $15,000 from their retirement savings on legal fees. They had been so confident in their plan that they had not considered what would happen if they could not prove their lies in court. 3 months after the nightmare began, we had our day in court. Judge Margaret Chen was a no-nonsense woman in her 60s who had clearly seen every type of family dispute imaginable. She listened patiently as my parents' lawyer stumbled through their opening argument, trying to explain why they had no documentation for such a large financial transaction. When Marcus stood up to present our case, it was like watching a master craftsman at work. He methodically presented 8 years of my financial records, demonstrating beyond any doubt that every penny of the down payment and every mortgage payment had come from my own earnings. "Your Honor, Marcus," said his voice, carrying the weight of absolute certainty, "this is not a case about a family loan gone wrong. This is a case about parents who became so fixated on getting their son to give up his home that they were willing to commit fraud in order to take it from him." The look on Judge Chen's face when she realized what Harold and Patricia had attempted was worth every penny of Marcus's fee. "Mr. and Mrs. Patterson," she said, addressing my parents directly, "I have reviewed all the evidence presented in this case, and I find no credible support for your claims. In fact, I find your allegations to be entirely without merit and potentially fraudulent in nature." Dad's face went white, and Mom actually started crying. "Not only am I dismissing your lawsuit," Judge Chen continued, "but I am ordering you to pay all court costs and legal fees incurred by your son in defending against these baseless accusations. Mr. Thompson, please submit your fee documentation to the court within 10 business days." As we left the courthouse, Harold and Patricia could not even look at me. Danny, who had been sitting in the back of the courtroom, approached me with tears in his eyes. "Keith, I am so sorry," he said, his voice breaking. "I never wanted it to go this far. I never thought they would actually sue you. Danny, you have 3 kids to think about, but this was never the right way to get a house," I replied. "You should have been looking for solutions, not waiting for someone else to hand you one." The months that followed were the hardest of my life, but also the most enlightening. I made the difficult decision to cut off all contact with Harold and Patricia for 6 months while I processed what they had done to me. The betrayal ran so deep that I needed time to heal before I could even consider forgiveness. During that time, I threw myself into my work and was promoted to senior software engineer. The raise that came with the promotion was substantial, and for the first time in years I had money left over after paying all my bills. More importantly, I discovered what real family actually looked like. My neighbors, the Rodriguez family, had welcomed me into their circle from the moment I moved into the neighborhood. When they learned about the lawsuit, Maria Rodriguez brought me homemade tamales and offered to testify as a character witness if I needed one. Their teenage son, Miguel, helped me install new security cameras around my house, and their daughter, Sophia, always waved when she saw me working in my garden. 8 months after the court case ended, Danny came to my house alone. He looked healthier than he had in years, and there was something different about his demeanor. "Keith, I wanted you to know that I found a better job," he said, as we sat on my back porch. "Sarah and I saved up enough for a down payment on a 3-bedroom house about 20 minutes from here. The kids each have their own rooms now." I felt genuinely happy for him. "That is great news, Danny. I am proud of you for making it happen. I learned something from all this," he continued. "I spent so much time feeling sorry for myself about our housing situation that I stopped looking for real solutions. I let Mom and Dad convince me that taking your house was somehow justified because I had kids, and you did not. We talked for 2 hours that day, really talked for the first time since we were teenagers." Danny apologized, not just for the lawsuit, but for the months of pressure and guilt trips that had preceded it. He admitted that he had known all along that what our parents were planning was wrong, but he had been so desperate for a way out of their cramped apartment that he had convinced himself it was somehow fair. Harold and Patricia never apologized. They paid the court-ordered fees and legal costs, which totaled nearly $30,000, but they never acknowledged that what they had done was wrong. In their minds, I think they still believed that I should have just given Danny the house voluntarily, and everything that followed was my fault for being stubborn. I eventually restored limited contact with them, but our relationship would never be the same. Trust once broken so completely is nearly impossible to rebuild. The experience taught me that family is not just about blood relations or shared genetics. Real family are the people who support your dreams instead of trying to guilt you into giving them up. They are the people who celebrate your successes instead of resenting them. They are the people who respect the boundaries you set instead of trying to manipulate you into abandoning them. Sometimes, the family you choose treats you better than the family you are born into, and that is a lesson worth more than any house. Have you ever had to stand up to family members who tried to make you feel guilty for protecting something you worked hard for? Let me know in the comments below how you handled it and whether you think I was right to fight back against my parents' lawsuit. If this story resonated with you, please hit that like button and subscribe for more real-life stories about family drama and standing up for yourself. Share this video with anyone who needs to hear that it is okay to set boundaries even with family. Thank you for watching, and remember that your hard work and sacrifices matter no matter what anyone else tries to tell you.